Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I am Marilyn Suchan, a producer of Catalyst and your host for today's webinar. Today, we are talking about the journey from assistant to staff writer, and I have three wonderful guests who I will introduce you to right now. First, we have Matthew McCue. Matthew McCue is a screenwriter and producer who was born and raised in New York. He's a Fulbright Scholar, tarot card reader, and a David Bowie fan who once freed a llama from a petting zoo. Most recently, Matthew has worked on Hit and Run for Netflix, Pachinko for Apple's streaming service, and is currently working on the amazing adventures of Kavalier and Clay for Showtime. We also have Eugene Ramos. Eugene Ramos is a Humanitas Prize-nominated writer from Chicago. He's an alum of Columbia University's Film Division, the Cape New Writers Fellowship, and the Clarion Science Fiction Writers Workshop. Most recently, he was the showrunner's assistant on the Netflix series Daybreak and wrote for the show's podcast spinoff, The Only Podcast Left. Last but not least, we have Alexa Babin. Alexa Babin is a writer who most recently worked as a writer's PA on the show with Eugene. Oh, that was my Alexa speaker, if you've heard that. She worked as a writer's PA on the Netflix drama series Daybreak with Eugene. She also worked as an assistant to the executive producer of NCIS Los Angeles and as a production assistant on various reality TV shows. Thank you all for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
My pleasure. Let us dive right on in to becoming a staff writer. So tell us, what does that pathway look like for someone going up the assistant ladder?
I mean, I think it's different for everyone. I'll just go ahead and kick it off with that. I know probably you two have a lot more to pitch into this than I do, because as you'll soon find out, I'm not there yet. But I think everyone's journey is different. And once you're in a room, once you're in a writer's office, it's sort of just going up from there. A lot of times it's writer's PA, which is what I've been doing, or showrunner's assistant. And then often after that jumps to writer's assistant and then hopefully staff writer after that. But yeah, everyone kind of starts in a different place, and sometimes it takes a while to even get into the writer's office.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Did either of you want to add any thoughts onto that? She pretty much covered it there.
Yeah, I think that's kind of been my experience as well, is that everybody has a completely different story, but that kind of finding your way into the writer's room in one way or another, whatever the staff makeup is that lets whoever it is they let into that room, whether it's the writer's assistant, the script coordinator, the writer's PA, the showrunner's assistant, whoever can get in there. And then when they start actually listening to you, that's the second part of it, or if they want to listen to you. And then usually that seems like it leads to the staff writing portion of it.
Right.
Yeah, I was listening to this webinar recently, and there is a director named Dean Lim who was talking about how to break in as a TV director. And he outlined 4 different ways, which I think applies to writers as well. And he said the first way is nepotism. And a lot of people get their assistant or staff writing jobs because, you know, they know the showrunner. The second way is to get into a program, a TV writing fellowship, something like that. Third way is starting as assistant and working your way up. And the fourth way, he said, was to hammer your way in. And I don't know, I don't have that sort of disposition to do that, which is basically you just keep talking to the people who could hire you and say, I'm available, I can write, I can do this. And I don't know, he thinks that if you hammer enough, they will let you in.
Oh, so more of just constant reaching out and letting people know you're available. And
yeah, I think that's another way of saying to really flex your network.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say that, tell me if you guys agree, that to do that method, you would really have to know that your skills are sharpened and your writing samples are super strong. Otherwise, that could be a detriment to your name and what is said about you.
Yeah, I think it could definitely backfire. You need to really do it politely, I think, because you could quickly annoy someone.
Yeah. Yeah. And like you're saying, if it doesn't ring true, like you said for yourself, Eugene, then it's probably not the best way for you to go anyway.
I once heard, sorry to cut you off. I once heard, I don't remember where it's from, but someone told me you may just get one shot for someone to pay attention and read your script. And so you better make sure that you're ready when the shot comes.
Yes.
And so I think I've taken maybe a little bit more cautious of a route, for better or for worse, because I want that moment when a door or a window or whatever is open to me, when I pass something off and try to convince someone that I'm ready, that I actually have the weight behind that, and that it's not just words and they read and they're disappointed. So I definitely agree that your skill set has to be able to back up, the banging, the hammering at the door. But I mean, it seems like that could work. I think persistence is obviously key here, but I totally agree that skill set, you've got to have that if you're going to go that route.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I've found that I don't know how you two have found these things to turn out, because who knows, it's also different for everyone. But I've found that these jobs kind of come up all of a sudden, or they come up and then they go away, and then suddenly they come right back up, and you need to be able to give in that writing sample or be ready for that interview. So, really having some sort of a polished sample that you really know this is the one that at any moment I could hand this to a person and they could read it is important, because I mean, my first writing assistant job, I happened to know a pair of showrunners who were mentors to me, and I was meeting them for coffee, just totally meeting them for coffee. And while I was there, they were like, hey, do you want to be the writer's assistant? You need to start in like 10 days. And I had no idea that was what was happening. And I was like, okay, I just need to get these 8 things in a row instantly. But, that kind of, you need to be ready to jump when someone says jump. It's true, because, especially now where the seasons don't exist the way that they used to, and with things like Netflix and Apple and Amazon and everything else, a room could start, tomorrow afternoon. So who knows? And I think just kind of knowing I have these 3 or 4 things that I need to have in place, like a resume. I hate resumes. But like knowing that, like when you get to a new job, update the resume, like all those annoying things your parents say, you kind of need to have those things ready.
Yeah. So what is that point then where you have your scripts, you've been working on them for several months, maybe even a year or so? What is that point for you where you go, okay, this is ready and you've done all the work, it's time to share it? How about you, Eugene?
That's hard, because I always feel like when I have a sample ready and I feel really confident about it, I'll hand it over to a friend, and my friend will give me more notes to make more changes to the script. So, I mean, I definitely have right now at least 2 or 3 samples that are ready to go, and I'm constantly updating all of them while also working on new stuff. So, I mean, I feel like every writer is never ready to finish something off. You just need to be confident enough to just let it go and trust in it.
Right.
Yeah, I think the notes are never ending. It's, I think, a judgment call, but obviously there's some judgment calls that are better than others. If you had asked me 2 years ago, like, do you think that this script is ready? And, I probably would have said yes. And yet that's a script that I was still working on a month ago. You can send it to 10 people and get 10 different sets of notes and go through all of that and think, okay, this is it. And you could send it out to 5 more people that haven't read it, and they could give you entirely different notes. And so, at least for me, again, because I still feel so new to all this in comparison to a lot of the people that I've met out here. But I think it gets to a point where, like Eugene was saying, you've got to trust in it, and you've got to know a clear vision for it and what it's about and who it's about. and who your audience is and what you're trying to accomplish with that story. And at a certain point, you just stop asking for notes, I guess. At least that's sort of the point that I got to. I got so many notes and so many of them overlapped that I figured out, okay, these are the main things that I need to clarify and fix. And after that, a lot of the notes I would get were sort of miscellaneous things that I didn't feel like really aligned with my vision for the script. And I felt like, logically it worked. I felt like it hit all the right moments. And so for me, that's when I decided to stop on the most recent thing that I've written. And I could have it wrong, but I think ultimately it's up to you as the writer when to stop, because you could keep getting notes forever and ever and ever and end up with a pilot that at one point could have been really good, but you just kept messing with it, that you worked it to death in a way.
Yeah. Yeah. And talking about how you were saying, Matthew, that you always have to be ready at the drop of a hat. Could that same thing apply then to being staffed on a show, or do you have to have a manager or agent when we're allowed to have agents again? How does that work?
Are you asking me specifically? I don't know. I mean, I have not been represented yet. I was briefly on a specific thing, I've written an episode for one show, and I have been promoted to staff writer on this show. But that is not.
Yeah, that's amazing. Way to go.
That purely came from being there doing the job. I would imagine, because it has not happened this way, that to go straight into the room as a writer, obviously you'd need some kind of representation, or you would have had to have worked in some kind of capacity for one of the showrunners or someone who's very directly connected to them. I think it's very hard otherwise to get a script into those people's hands. Like, frankly, I don't even know how you pull that part off. But to become the writer's assistant, and I don't know how it was for you guys, I had to give in a writing sample each time. And so they at least knew that I've written scripts. In the Pachinko and in this case with Kavalier and Clay, they're both period pieces, and that's kind of what I prefer writing, is World War II and predominantly that time period, which is where these two seasons happen to take place. So they knew I could do that,
right?
Which was one of the reasons I was there. But I don't know. First of all, I never know how you get an agent. So 20 years later, I still don't know the answer to that question. But I don't know how you get a script to a showrunner or get into a room without representation. That seems like the ultimate little trick to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems to be, at least from my perspective, the only thing I've seen in place of that is some sort of personal relationship. Yeah. Like you were saying, whether it's someone you've worked for or worked alongside of. I haven't really heard of other ways to sort of get your foot in the door.
Right. Yeah, our jobs are not posted on any job boards or anything. So how did you all find those first assistant gigs?
So I did this fellowship with CAPE, which is the Coalition of Asian Pacifics in Entertainment, and they're really good with hooking up alums with work. They're pretty well connected. So one of the EPs at Daybreak had contacted them and said, we're looking for a showrunner's assistant. And so they contacted all the alums and asked who's interested, and I replied. And I got a reply maybe a month later saying, we've already hired the showrunner's assistant. Would you like to come in and interview for the writer's PA? And so I went in and interviewed, and I wasn't really looking forward to it, because I kind of got, I had this great opportunity to be the writer's assistant for another show, and it didn't pan out. And so to go down to writer's PA, I was a little reluctant. It would have been a huge pay cut from the job I had at the time. And, but I decided to go to the interview, and I got it, and I was actually gonna turn them down. But I was at a writer's workshop in Switzerland at the time, and there's a gentleman named Christopher Lockhart who worked at WME, who's a story editor there. And, I was telling him my dilemma. I said, look, I can't afford to take this job. I don't think I could do it. And he said to me, if you stay at your current job, you have a 0% chance of furthering your career as a writer. But if you take this PA job, you have a more than 0% chance of, eventually getting to the writer's room. And, right after that conversation, I put in my 2 weeks. So.
Yeah, that is a big dilemma, because a lot of these introductory jobs in Hollywood don't exactly pay the amount of money that you need to survive here, right? So it really is investing into your future.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
Yeah.
And aren't you glad you took that job? That's how we became friends.
Exactly.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
I mean, it worked out only because of, for our particular positions, we got the 60-hour guarantee. And I know some shows don't have that, and I've heard that it's less and less common these days. Mm-hmm. So without that 60-hour guarantee, I don't think I would have been able to pay for rent.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then, because you took this writer's PA gig, how did you get up to showrunner's assistant?
Well, so the showrunner's assistant at the time is a good friend of mine. He's just this amazing writer, and while we were on the show, he got representation at a big agency, and they got him a staff writing gig, and so he took that gig, and I had to interview for the showrunner's assistant position, and I was going up against people who had done the position for years. The only advantage I had was that I knew the show pretty well. I had been working on the show for a few months, and I made the case that, you wouldn't have to catch up the new person. I already know what's going on. I know all the people, and it would just be a smooth transition. And I have a feeling that the showrunner was going to hire me anyway. He just wanted to go through the formality of interviewing me, which was
right.
Which is great. I mean, our showrunner was a former assistant himself, so he knows the importance of being an assistant and working your way up. And I completely value the opportunity that he gave me.
Yeah, that's amazing. And then Alexa came in and filled in your spot.
Right. Yeah, filled in the gap. That was, I don't know how unexpected that was for you, Eugene, but that was out of the blue for me. I mean, that was the last thing I was expecting to happen, but it was one of the best things in the end.
Yeah. So working off of that, how do you ask for jobs and approach your interview process about these different positions?
That's a good question.
Thanks.
That is a good question.
I don't know that I've ever asked for a job. I've done my fair share of interviewing, but I don't know that I've necessarily had to. I guess I haven't been anywhere for a long enough amount of time to where a step up was a logical move. Again, I've been in LA for, what is it now? I guess coming on 3 years in the fall. So, and I've moved around a lot. The first year was very turbulent for me. And the second year was when I was at NCIS LA, and last fall was when I started Daybreak. So I'm still getting a lot of experience under my belt. But in terms of interviewing, I don't know if this is necessarily a blanket statement, but what helped me personally was to think of it as not an interview at all, but just meeting someone and letting it be something between like networking and talking with a stranger. And so I still prepped, I still did all my research and my homework and everything. But when I showed up, I just treated it like a conversation. And I think for a lot of entertainment jobs, especially in television, most people are pretty casual, more so than, when I interviewed at agencies and stuff like that. I mean, that was definitely not casual in my experience. But yeah, I remember when I met with our Daybreak showrunner, he asked me questions and I answered them, but I also got to ask a lot of questions, and it sort of just turned into a let's get to know each other time. And that really has helped me with interviewing for things, not to be so anxious and stressed out and like, oh, I have to prove myself, because you do, but you also just want to get along with whoever you're talking to. Mm-hmm. And that approach has been really not only beneficial and effective for me, but it also just makes it so much more fun.
Yes.
Because there are periods where you interview for a lot of things and nothing pans out for a while. Yep. So I think maybe for my own sanity as well, I sort of changed my approach to be more of just a conversation.
Yeah. Can you all share those interviews? What are some kinds of questions you receive, and what are some kinds of questions you also ask that are important for you?
Well, I think. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. I mean, I've interviewed for a handful of new positions after Daybreak was canceled, and it's been a little bit difficult for me. I'm in this sort of weird gray area where I'm sort of already an accomplished writer. They'll look at my resume and they'll say, you got nominated for Humanitas Prize. Why do you want to be an assistant? And then, but I also don't have the representation who will put my name forth to be staffed as a writer. So the interview becomes a sort of dance where I have to try to convince the showrunner that I'll be, a very capable assistant. The worry for them is that, when they interview, a pretty accomplished writer for an assistant position, their worry is that they're going to leave immediately. And so, I don't know. It's been difficult. It's been hard. I think they tend to go with people who they know for sure who will be an assistant for the entire season. And so that's the thing I'm sort of trying to figure out right now. I mean, Matt, if you have any suggestions of what to do, I've been even considering sort of taking stuff off my resume so it doesn't,
Yeah. I understand that totally. Forgive my voice. The pollen, my East Coast lungs are not used to West Coast pollen. I feel similarly. Like I had been writing features for a bit, and then made one, and that was kind of on the festival circuit and stuff. And that was kind of when some of the people I had met in different labs and things similar to Eugene, mentor-wise, had started to post or email out different positions, predominantly in TV, and where some of the kind of writer's assistant things started to surface a little bit. And there were one or two times where they were like, oh, you don't want to go that route though, because you've already done these other things. But I was like, yeah, but those other things are not leading to a place. Like it was a very small movie, very, a great short film, but honestly, then what? Like, not that I did not direct it, wrote it, or produced it, but like just being like, yeah, those things went to a spot that then stopped. So you had to kind of step back and come through the assistant door and hope that it leads to more things. And I do think there is a little bit of a fear of, are you going to stay for the whole time if you're somebody who they think could easily get a job that's, a little bit more advanced, or really honestly what we were just talking about, which is a little bit better pay, because the assistant jobs are terrible pay. They're terrible pay. And that's, a whole other conversation and a whole other guild issue that they should address. But it is a real issue, like, because these shows usually have the rooms at the very least in very major cities with very high rents and very high cost of living. And then they pay the longest hour job the smallest money. And, obviously this is a phenomenon throughout many fields, but this is what we're talking about right now. And so that's something they should fix. But I think really knowing, if you can say to them something like, I'm fully committed because my hope is to do a great job so that in season 2, you'll move me up. That if you can kind of be frank about the fact that that's the way you want to do it. You want to give everything you've got to rung number 1 this year in the hope that next year you're on rung number 2. And you just kind of have to be frank about the fact that you're going to stick. How long is it? Fine, I'll say till then. Like on the second one I did, which was Pachinko, Sue Hugh was the showrunner of that, and Sue Hugh is really an amazing person. If you have a chance to work for her, everybody should. But she knew exactly what the schedule was. She knew that the room was going from April to July, and then there was going to be a rewrite period, and then there was going to be this whole other phase, and she knew exactly how long everything was. And she was able to say from the beginning, I'm going to need you from this day to this day. And the job ran 1 day shorter than that full, run, which was, crazy, because these things are very hard to plan. But she had, much like Eugene was referencing before, she had worked her way up from assistant. And so she knew that, you're making a commitment here, and I'm, making a commitment to you, and it's going to be this long, and this is what's going to happen. So if you can get yourself into that honest of a conversation, and obviously feel like you're getting, honesty in return, I think that's one way to overcome some of those hurdles.
Yeah, I mean, from a less experienced standpoint, I feel like I very much agree with the whole honesty is the best policy thing. I'm sure maybe it'll bite me in the butt someday, but I know when I first moved out here, I had a lot of people telling me that I had to play the game and say and do certain things to get to where I wanted to be. And that was hard for me to swallow, because I get that there's a benefit to playing the game in some situations and saying what people want to hear, but I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. I had to, if I honestly didn't think that a job was going to be for me, or if there was a time commitment that I didn't think I could fulfill, I told them, and it led to me not having certain opportunities work out. But in the long run, I'm proud of that, and I'm really happy that that's the way I chose to do it. And I think that totally lines up with what you're saying. It's like, yes, you're convincing them, I have all this experience, but I'll stick around. But you're telling them why you're willing to stick around, because that seems to be the question that they're really digging for an answer to. I don't know. I feel like it's good to have that brutal honesty when there's space for it like that.
Yeah. And for me, it took a while to find that first showrunner assistant gig. So for other interviews I was going on, it took a bit of navigating my resume for them to see how my skills applied to other entry-level positions. Did any of you find that in your interviews, where you had to really make it fit the mold that they were trying to hold?
Well, I had been an admin assistant for a few years at a community college, being the admin to different deans. So I tried to use, the skills and the experience that I had on that job to apply to the PA position, which is basically, you run the office. And then the showrunner's assistant position, where, you're directly assisting the showrunner. And, I was the assistant to one of the deans at Santa Monica College, and she was responsible for something like 200 employees. And I had to, do payroll for 200 employees. I had to, keep in touch with all these people and make sure everything was running okay. And so, a writer's room is smaller than that. So just had to show that I could apply what I learned from Santa Monica College into a writer's room.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's all about reframing and finessing sometimes, kind of framing it in a way that's showing people or giving people the chance to see skills in a different light. I can't think of a specific time that it felt like I had to do that, or, you know, I was going to be dead in the water or something.
Right.
But yeah, it's sort of like changing your resume based on the job you're applying to, like sort of editing what's on there and, you know, for what's relevant to the position that you're applying to. And I remember I met someone when I first moved out here through a hometown connection, and he was basically giving me his number one interviewing tip, which was like, get the job description, or if you can't find that, just ask someone who's done that type of job and get them to give you some words of tasks that they might ask you to do. And then when you're pitching yourself in the interview or in the meeting, whatever they're calling it, have concrete examples of those verbs that they give you. So if they need someone who can coordinate, you know, give them examples of when you coordinated something. And it sounds really simple, but I don't know. I think that's part of it that we don't always think about doing, but it's so simple when you really kind of boil it down.
Right. And if you don't plan for that in your interview, then you might get nervous and rattled by that question. But if you prepare ahead of time, then you'll be golden and streamline the whole process. So if you guys could go, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think if you can ask for as much as they're willing to give ahead of the interview as well, you know, sometimes they're willing to share the pilot, or they're willing to share, you know, an overview of the show if it's a first season show or something like that. So then you at least can kind of have a little bit more of a sense of what you're walking into. And I agree with everything you're saying about tailoring your resume to the job. I mean, it really is that simple. It takes a little bit more work because you kind of have to do it each time. But I think everything you just said, I agree with 100%. And I would say once you're into the interview itself, one of the things that I've found valuable, and it's not always gotten me the job, but I've found it valuable, is to, at a certain point, just flat out ask what it is they want you to do and how they want you to do it. Because every showrunner wants their notes, or the way the notes are put together, or how much you're allowed to speak, or how many questions you're asking, or doing the board. They want all that done differently. So I think to say, you know, what's your style? How do you want it done? Do you have an example of notes that you thought were good, or something like that? Then you can kind of, you know, at least have a starting point. You're not just in a guessing game with a person.
Right.
And I think that people are willing to share that because they want you to do the job well. They don't want you to come in and then discover, holy crap, you can't do it. They want to know that they've got the right person. And so if you can get into, I mean, maybe this is just my style, but I find that if you can get into a situation where you're asking each other questions back and forth, you're on much better ground than if it's really just questions coming out of one person or the other.
Yes,
totally. I love to ask in almost every interview I do nowadays, what qualities are you looking for in a person that you're going to put in this position? Like, do you need them to handle things without you knowing? Do you need to know everything all the time? Like, do you need them to be a stone wall so that you can just write in your office? Or do you need to be interrupted with, you know, every little thing because you just need to be aware? And like, I've worked for both different types of people, and it's really important to know that stuff going in, because if you're bothering someone that wants like 2 hours of time blocked off to edit or write or whatever, you just need to handle stuff for them. But if they need to know, you better not do it behind their back.
You're right.
That's going to be good for you. So I definitely agree. I feel like you got to know that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. If you three could go back in time, knowing all that you know now, what would you do differently?
I would definitely network earlier. I don't know. I always felt like, you know, my work would talk on my behalf. And I remember doing this workshop once, and the exercise we were doing was create an elevator pitch for yourself, and basically to sell yourself when you meet someone. And the whole hour I was just rolling my eyes and thinking, this is stupid. My script is going to get me the work and it's not going to be me. And after that, we were sent to a networking event to use our personal pitches. And I was just watching, the people who were in the workshop with me use their personal pitches and see how these, producers and managers would react to them. And it was just eye-opening. And when I came to LA, I still sort of thought, you know what, I'm gonna let my scripts sell me. And I didn't go anywhere. And my friends who were just amazing at telling people who they are and what they love, what they're passionate about, those were the friends that were getting work. And then they had the scripts to back that up. Mm-hmm. And so it's, for the past few years, that's the thing I've been working on. I go to as many Writers Guild events as I can. And I show up all the time, and it's at the point where people know me, people recognize me, people know what I write, what I'm passionate about. And so eventually those connections are going to work in my favor.
Yeah. How do you break that ice when you're networking with someone to keep in touch?
Ooh, Marilyn, I'm not good at that. So what I do oftentimes is I tag along with someone who is great at networking. And they're always the person that says, can I get a card, or can I email you? And then because you're in that sort of proximity, it almost seems rude for that person not to give me, their card, or it opens up that opportunity for me to say, do you mind if I get that card too? And so
buddy networking system.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. You need a wing person.
A wing person. Yes, absolutely. Well, how about, go on, Alexa.
I just kind of go for it, I guess. This isn't really answering the original question, but in terms of breaking the ice while networking,
I'll go back.
Yeah, I think that if you've had a nice conversation with someone, if it wasn't too weird or too awkward, and you actually feel that, you want to stay in touch with them, because let's be real, we've all met people that we maybe don't want to make the effort to stay in touch with, for better, for worse. I try not to be that way. But I think it's easy to fall into thinking, wow, it's going to be so much work to keep up with all these people. But again, just thinking of it, like, you'd never know what could come of this. And we may really get along. We may work together someday. We may develop something or write something together. If they're a director, maybe they'll want to make something that I've written. Like, you just never know. And so, I don't know. I kind of just straightforward ask people. I say, hey, like, I really enjoyed talking to you. Would you be okay if we swapped emails, or if we swapped cards, or would it be, would you like to stay in touch? I really had a good time chatting. And I think generally people are down to say yes. I don't think everyone will always initiate if you suggest the swap. So I think if you're the one that brings that up, it's kind of on you to reach out down the road and, maybe even follow up briefly after you meet them, and again say, hey, this is Alexa. So great meeting you. Don't be a stranger, however you want to say it. And I don't know, I found that people are pretty open to that. And especially with peers. I mean, I'm in my 20s and I'm constantly meeting other assistants in their 20s, and we're all very much in the same boat with the same struggles. And I think everyone really likes meeting other people, especially if they show up to an event. It's like, that's the whole point. So I kind of just go for it, unless there's a social cue that tells me it's a bad idea or something. Like, read the room,
Right.
But I usually just ask.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mary Lynn, you should talk about your networking strategies, because it's always like when I'm with you networking, it's always amazing to sort of see how you approach it and then how you follow up the next day.
Oh, that's very kind. I could probably do a whole webinar on that.
I believe that.
I'm thinking of one screening we went to, Eugene, where we went to say hello to the showrunner afterwards, and there was a crazy line of people trying to talk with this showrunner. So Eugene and I just patiently waited, and I saw there was a guy trying to cut in front of me, And, so I got my jersey, like, ready to go stance on. And the showrunner looked at me and said, I'll be right with you. And then talked to someone else for a moment. And so I didn't care about this person who was trying to cut me off, because the showrunner saw me and you and was like, it's fine. And I noticed that, I don't know if you remember, Eugene, the guy that the showrunner was talking to was asking for a job or to work with him. I couldn't gather the exact words. I could just tell based off of the showrunner's reactions and face and a few keywords here and there. So I knew Eugene and I must make sure to be polar opposite to just have a good moment with him, and also stand out from this other person who's foolishly asking for a job 2 seconds into meeting someone, right? So I broke the ice with this showrunner by saying, I just wanted to say thank you for being here tonight. And I just started my first job as a showrunner's assistant. So I see how hard your job is, and congratulations on all you've done and hopeful future successes, something like that. And he just thanked us. And you could just see this like relief in his eyes, like, oh, okay, cool. Can I have my wine now? And then I followed up. I found him on Instagram and I sent him a message thanking him again, explaining who I was. And he responded. And so that was just one way that I think you should network, by not asking for anything, just breaking the ice and getting to know someone, like you're all saying.
Yeah. Yeah, I found if I could go back, the best advice actually is something Alexa said earlier about going to the different, when you go on an interview, to just kind of treat it like a conversation. I think that if I could go back and tell like crazy anxious me to treat everything like that, rather than treating it like I was going to get the job to win the Academy Award this afternoon or forget it.
Right.
If I could just calm it all down. Because I think most interviews or meetings seem like they're not about the job you're meeting about then. They're about just meeting that person, and then something's going to come up, who knows when. And it might just be you're going to have another conversation, or they're going to introduce you to so-and-so, or they told you about a cookie that you like for the rest of your life. But that it's just knowing like, I'm in the conversation with this person from CBS. Great. Mm-hmm. That's a good conversation to have had, and not worry so much about like, I need this job right now. If you can adopt that mindset, even though it's difficult, it's not easy. Everybody wants the job. They're there for the interview. Why else would they be there? But if you can take a little of that pressure off and know something will come of this, if you can let that go on for a little bit, something does start coming of it. You can start to see the fruits of those meetings. Even if it just turns out to be, people who you trust reading your work, or people who become, friends. It's a valuable way to go.
Yeah. Alexa, what would you tell yourself with what you know now?
Well, I've had some time to think about it now that we've had a few minutes, but yes, I heard your Alexa go off.
Darn it, I raced to mute myself so inconspicuously.
I think there's probably a lot of things I would say, but maybe the biggest one for me personally is it's a twofer. Don't take yourself so seriously and don't be so afraid. I think that I came out of college very like, the weight of the world is on my shoulders and everything matters and I can't screw this up, otherwise I'll never have a career. And I don't really know where I got that from, but it didn't serve me at all. And so I think if I could go back and tell myself either in college or right when I first moved out here, which was shortly after college, just go for it and be yourself and don't freak out about every little thing. I felt like I had to be the best or perfect. And when you get into that mindset, you end up taking yourself out of the race altogether, because chances are you're never going to be the best. There will always be someone better, and you're definitely never going to be perfect. And I would sometimes talk myself into a corner and say, well, if you can't be the best, there's no point even trying. Mm-hmm. And that's not helpful. And I don't know. I wish I would have, had a little bit more of a bird's eye view of how this all works and sort of how the obstacles can be really good things in both our career paths and just our lives in general. So that's probably what I would tell myself. That's a little more of a broad answer, but that's probably what it would be for me.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And I was told we have one question right now from our audience that we'll bring up. I have my own indie TV pilot and show Bible done. Should I try to line up a writer's room before pitching to buyers or networks?
An indie TV project, is that what you said?
Yes, that is the way the question was stated. I have my own indie TV pilot and show Bible done. Should I try to line up a writer's room before pitching to buyers or networks? It sounds like the order of operations is a little mixed up here.
Yeah.
So let's help this person understand the process. You have a script, right? We have our TV pilot ready to go. And we have a Bible for the season, or at least the pilot, and the feel of the show, right? Where do they go next with that?
Well, it depends on, how they envision the show turning out. Like, do they see it being something that goes through a major streaming service, or is it when they say indie, is it a smaller thing that is something that could be pulled off on their own, and that could be put out, I don't know how, through YouTube or another streaming service. But if it's something that would need a production company behind it, and this is one person's opinion, I think you would take the pilot and the Bible and try to pitch your way in through production companies and that sort of thing. It seems like you would do that before putting a room together.
Right. I have a follow-up to the question. They just clarified the pilot's already shot. So they're asking if they should line up a writer's room before taking it out to pitch. So perhaps I think this is a difference between packaging your concept and, right, because you wouldn't pick out a writer's room until it was sold to either a production company, network, who would then give you, the showrunner, control to say, okay, who do you want in your room? And you start building it out from there.
Yeah.
Right?
That seems the most logical.
But you could package it and say, I have spoken with writers in my network that wrote on this show, that show, and the other as successful writers. And when this gets bought, they would definitely be on board to write for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, because, and again, I'm not speaking from like a personal experience in this exact situation, but it seems like whoever is going to help make the rest of this series may like some say in who will be writing it. And I think that's maybe why rooms are one of the last things to come together, at least when the pilot is not yet shot, when it's just in script. So that was sort of my gut reaction, was like, if you come to them with writers already, it doesn't leave them too much wiggle room. I kind of like the idea of, I've talked to several writers who've worked on XYZ. I would like to have these types of voices and sort of pitch it that way. But having writers set in stone doesn't really feel like a necessary step before pitching. But that's just my take.
Yeah. And there's a checks and balances between the showrunner and the network, and sometimes the production company if you're working with a pod. So the writers would still have to be approved by the network executive.
Yeah.
But having a shot pilot and your Bible completed is a great package, because you're not leaving anything out. You're saying, this is the tone and feel. Here, you can watch this pilot we created. Here is the Bible of how we envision getting it all done. And here's the pilot script if you want to read that after. So you're engaging in different ways which I think is very prepared.
Yeah, it sounds like a great place to be.
Yeah, having the pilot shot sounds great.
Right.
And it seems like maybe this is redundant, but more important than having a writer's room, picked out and lined up is making sure that you're pitching the right places. So based on like the tone of your show, the level of quality, the type of story it is, even stuff like big ideas, whether it's streaming or broadcast. I think pitching it to the right place and not just trying to get it made everywhere will be obviously a more tactical approach. So that to me feels more important than having your room assembled.
Right.
Because it'll work smarter, not harder,
Right. So targeting and focusing all of those efforts to fine tune is what you're saying, right?
Yeah, because if you're, going to write a procedural or something, there's a lot of networks that'll probably do that faster than Hulu or something. So I think just knowing what it is and knowing where it fits, because it's in your interest to sell it that way, but it's also, you want there to be viewers. And if people are very loyal to like Thursday nights on ABC or something, and yours fits there, it's like wise to know that and try and get it there, because that'll be maybe the best place for it to be introduced to the world. Does that make sense?
That does. Yeah. And I hope that whoever asked that question, I hope we helped. If not, keep filling in the comment section so we can really clarify everything for you. But I do see we have another question. So this one is, do you read scripts from other writers to help people move their projects forward?
Totally.
Yeah.
All the time. Yeah.
That's half the fun.
Yeah. Eugene reads all of my scripts, every draft. Thank you.
I mean, the thing is that, so I went to film school and I went to film school with Matt. You just start building a group of friends and you just want to help each other out. And I mean, there are these great stories coming out of the school that we went to. My favorite one is the person who wrote Wreck-It Ralph, needed some help writing it and called up his friend. Friend came in, and this friend, eventually went on to write Frozen. And so, that's a thing I love. If you help your friend out, they're going to help you back. And that's why I love helping my friends out. I love being their script and hoping and, that they succeed and trying to, get opportunities for them.
Yeah, I'm under the full belief that this is a team sport. I don't think that I mean, in some senses, like you are in competition for jobs, but I think that there's room for people. I don't think we have to knock each other out to race to the top or anything like that. Sure, you can do that, but I don't think that you have to. So when it comes to reading other people's work, I've found that it's really fun and it makes me a better writer, because I think part of being a good writer is being a good note giver, being good at constructive criticism and sort of learning what to look for that could make someone else's script stronger may actually be exactly what you need to make your own script stronger. And it's fun to be a part of something. And I haven't yet hit that point where, one of my friends that I've helped has gone on to make some huge thing that everyone knows, but I can imagine just the pleasure of like knowing the creator of one of my favorite shows because we went to college together. Like that will be awesome.
Yes.
So even that simple pleasure of saying, I remember back in 2020 when I read so-and-so's script and we had no idea what was going to happen. And then here we are in 2025 and everybody knows what it is. Like that can happen to anybody. And I just think that that's fun. Like, if nothing else, it's exciting. But I do think that reading other people's stuff and helping them makes you a better writer. And also, just a concluding thought on this, I feel like I'm talking a lot, but
you're great. You're great.
Part of being a TV writer is, it's like, I don't know what the percentage of split is, but for now I'm going to say it's like 50% writing and 50% personality. Like, people want to like you. They want to be able to hang out with you all day and pitch stories and share ideas. And so I think swapping scripts with friends and being in writers groups and stuff like that, it sort of preps you for that and gives you a little taste of it. And there's no harm in it. And I think there's only good stuff that comes from that, basically, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I agree. I think part of the survival technique for being a writer of any kind is figuring out who your trusted readers are, like which, obviously we all have friends who are writers, and that's wonderful. But then there's also the people like that person's going to give me the honest answer. Right. Or that person is going to read this script tonight because I need to apply for a job tomorrow. And I know the first 5 pages need to be fixed. And I don't know how to fix them because I've read it 10 times. So I need you to read it tonight and to be brutally honest with me. And it seems that is something that you can only have if you do the favor in return. Like, you can't just have everybody reading your scripts and you never do it in return. Like, that's just awful. Right. But also, like each of you are saying, like, all of these things fine-tune your own skills and make you a better, writer, but also a better conversationalist about story, which, as you were just saying, is one of the key components to being in a TV room is, can you talk about it? Not just can you actually, type it out. So I think having those kinds of ongoing conversations with your friends about their growing projects and about your own growing projects is like the thing you need going on in the background, right? Besides your actual, day-to-day job.
Yeah. I think that's a very inspiring way to end this. So everyone out there, get your writers group started and keep getting those pages out. Thank you guys so much for your time today, for joining me. This has been wonderful, and I hope it's been very informative for all of you at home. Thank you for tuning in, and make sure you go to catalystcontent.org to see what we have coming up next with our webinar series and learn more about the festival. We'll see you next time. Thank you so much.
Thanks.